Shalom, shalom. My name is Barney de Klerk. I'm making this video to talk about the Torah portion for this week. It's Parashat Tzav, and Tzav means command. It is from the book of Leviticus, chapters 6, 7, and 8. It starts off with talking about burnt offerings. Burnt offerings are burnt all night long, so the fire should be kept lit all night long. The tabernacle and later on in the temple, activities to worship Adonai was conducted during the daytime in broad daylight. At night, the only activity was somebody had to keep the fire burning for the burnt offerings, and somebody had to keep the westernly-most light of the menorah lit. And then there were guards on the walls or outside. And the only other activity is the high priest would have come at night to inspect the guards to see that they're guarding and not sleeping. And the expression that refers to the high priest coming to inspect the guards is that the high priest would come like a thief in the night. And this is the expression that the Bible used to explain Yeshua's return, like a thief in the night. Because he's our high priest, he's the high priest according to the order of Melchizedek, but he's also the high priest according to the order of Aaron. And, of course, he's the King of Kings from the line of David. So, in contrast with pagan worship happens in dark places at night, midnight, to worship demons who are afraid of the light. In contrast with that, serving Adonai Eloheinu is worship that we conduct in broad daylight, out in the open. Then I asked myself the question, with all the sacrifices in the tabernacle and later in the temple, where on earth did all the wood come from? The Middle East didn't look back then as it looks today. Remember when Abram and Lot came out of Egypt, and Abram said to Lot, choose which way you want to go. The plain of the 5 cities were attractive to Lot because there were good grass and trees for his animals. And today, that whole area is just desert, and the surface layer of the soil is even poisonous. And it's because of what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah, the rain of sulfur, burning sulfur, that destroyed the ecology there. So there were trees, there were bushes, there were grasslands. The current tree planting activity in Israel serves to restore the forestation that was there in biblical times. The Romans actually caused this an enormous environmental disaster. In the years 68, 69, 70 AD, they chopped down all the trees that were in Israel in order to crucify Jews on it. Josephus writes that as many as 500 Jews were crucified in a single day in that 69 AD and 70 AD. And 3 years after the year 70 AD, when Jerusalem and the temple was destroyed, that's when Masada fell. The Romans needed 3 years to build a ramp in order to get the Jews who fled to the top of Masada. And they destroyed Masada in 73 AD and then returned to Rome. And we know from history, Josephus and others, that the Romans crucified a Jew every mile of the journey back to Rome, from Jerusalem to Rome. In modern times on GPS, I checked, it's 2,500 miles. On today's roads, maybe it was a little bit further in biblical time, but every mile of the way from Jerusalem to Rome, they crucified a Jew. And they did that by cutting down trees along the way. So the lack of trees ruined the land for more than 1800 years. And now when the Jews returned, the land started returning as well, and the Jews are planting trees, the Israelis planting trees to return the land to its former glory. We also read about the grain offerings. In the grain offerings, only a memorial, a handful portion was burnt, and the rest went to the Cohen on duty. Except if a Cohen brought the grain offering, then all of it was burnt. In Leviticus 6 verse 9 and 6 verse 16, we see something that seems like a conflict. In 6 verse 9, the grain offering in the form of flour that's baked into mud-sized broad, and in Leviticus 6 verse 16, the flour is leavened and brought in the form of a loaf of bread. So trying to understand what's going on, I learned actually from Rabbi Chaim Richman that there's a total of 40 different grain offerings, and 30 of those are unleavened, and 10 of the 40 is with chametz, with leavened, swelled up bread. So that can be a good topic for future research, but I'm not really have my arms around that at the moment. Then we read about the trespass offering. It comes in 2 steps. It's about trespassing against your fellow man, against other people. And both steps are called trespass offering in the scriptures. The second part is actually the same as the sin offering as well, if you read the script, and that's Leviticus 7 verse 7. The trespass against another person is regarded as a sin against Adonai. You have to understand that, because we are commanded to love other people as we love ourselves. So a trespass against another person is breaking the commandment and therefore sin against Adonai. The trespass leg, or the first leg of the trespass offering, is based on repaying the other person for the damages they suffered because of what you did, plus another 20%. And then the second leg is the sin offering against Adonai, and that's based on what you can afford. That depends which animal you will bring as a sacrifice, as an offering to Adonai. And of course, Adonai knows what you can afford and not. The sin offering is a compulsory offering and not voluntary, and that leg, the second leg, makes the trespass offering also compulsory. The trespass is giving to the person you sinned against as a repair for damages, and the sin offering is given to Adonai, as all sin offerings are. When we compare this to modern law, somebody breaks in your house and steals from you, and they get caught. Do they repay you for the damage they caused and 20%? No. You have to fight with your insurance company, if you have insurance, to get some value, because the insurance companies will never give you the value you lost back, but you get nothing back from the thief. And if the thief is locked up and sentenced for the period that serves as the modern sin offering, then you still get nothing from him. In fact, as a taxpayer, you finance his stay in the prison. So if you compare modern law to Torah law is superior. It's far better. Do not believe those false teachers who lie that the Torah has been done away with. what was given in place of the Torah is worse than what the Torah is. And besides, the Torah law will not pass away ever, not before heaven and earth passes away first, as it is written in Yeshua's own words in Matthew 5 verse 17 to 19, and in Isaiah 40 verse 8, and in Psalm 119 verse 44. Probably other places too. Torah will not pass away. This week's Torah portion teaches us that the consumption of blood and fat is not allowed. In Leviticus 7 verse 26 and 27 is just one of the examples that it's repeated a few times. And it's well worth looking into more detail because it's not as bad as you think. Maybe digress a little bit. The commandment not to eat fat refers to the internal fat, chalef, which is the fat on the organs, which is forbidden to eat. But the shuman fat, the fat that's external, the fat on the muscles, on the red meat, that is kosher for consumption. So you can have a steak with a nice piece of fat on it, or a lamb chop with a nice piece of fat on it. That's completely kosher and absolutely biblical to enjoy. Regarding the blood, that's an interesting thing. We read several places in the Torah that drinking of blood is forbidden. Yet we know that Yeshua taught at one time a controversial teaching that people have to eat his body and drink his blood, and he lost a lot of followers because of that, because off the cuff it looks like it's against the Torah. And when we have communion, we remember the Last Supper and the Passover Seder meal that Yeshua had, and there he said, the bread is my body, take, eat. And the significance is that from the ancient prayer that you would say for the bread is Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam chemutzi lechem min haaretz. Blessed are you, Lord God, King of the universe, for bringing forth bread from the earth. Now, Adam was created from the earth. He was made from dust. Yeshua is the second Adam. He's coming forth from the generations of Adam, through Abram, through David. And so he was brought forth from the earth. He was truly God, but also truly man, brought forth. He is the man brought forth. He's the bread of life, the bread brought forth from the earth, that the blessing is about. And then regarding drinking the blood, if you think of Adam and Eve in the paradise, they were expelled from the paradise because they ate the forbidden fruit, the fruit of knowledge of good and evil. They already knew good, but from eating the fruit they gained the knowledge of evil. And Adonai expelled them from the garden, he said, before they eat the fruit of life. Now we know in the Torah everywhere that the drinking of blood is forbidden. The reason is the life of the animal is in the blood. So the blood is like the juice of the fruit of the tree of life. What Yeshua were on about when he said this wine is his blood, drink from it, what he said is his life is in the blood. And therefore, because it's not animal blood, of course it was wine, not his own physical blood, but his blood was poured out for us. And drinking the wine, we commemorate that the life eternal is in the blood of the Lamb, in the blood of Yeshua. So we drink the wine as the blood of Yeshua so that we can have life. It is the juice of the fruit of the tree of life. Enough about that for now. Regarding the sin offering and the blood, we have another little conflict in the text if you read it superficially. If we compare Leviticus 6 verse 17 to 21, in which the splattered blood of the sin offering that splatters on the robes of the priest, on his garment, then the priest have to leave his duty, have to wash his garments immediately. But in Leviticus 8 verse 30, we read that Moses sprinkled blood on the priest's garments in their ordination, and that blood served to ordain them for their duty. So what's the difference? First of all, the sin offering's blood stains on the priestly garments is not by design, but it is by accident. As the priest pours out the blood of the sin offering against the base of the altar, some of it may splatter on his clothes. Remember, the sin offering to atone for sin, the animal's blood stands for the repentant sinner. So the priestly robe have to be washed clean because the sinner's blood has to be washed away and can be no more. The priest's role is not to wear the sin of the offering, but to facilitate its taken away by pouring the blood against the altar base. So when the blood that represents the sin is splattered on him, he immediately has to leave. He's not suitable to do his duty. He has to wash his clothes, remove the sin. The priest is not a sin eater, in other words. And then when we look at the ordination, the blood is sprinkled over the priestly garments by design, with intention. The priest stands in his official role in the place of all the believers of the nation. And in this, the priest bears the sin of the nation in their official capacity before Adonai. Remember, the first one, the priest was not bearing the sin, and he must not bear the sin. In this one, the ordination, it is his occupational hazard, if you like. It's his duty to bear the sin of the nation. And the bloodstains remind them of that duty. It prophetically also points to the suffering servant Messiah that was drenched in blood as he hung on the cross. The blood on the priestly garments also refers to the conqueror, King of Kings Messiah when he returns. Remember, suffering servant Messiah covered in his own blood, the returning Messiah who tramples the enemy of Israel like you trample grapes in order to make wine. Their blood splatters on him. His robes are dripped in blood. We read that in Isaiah 63 verse 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and also in Revelation 19 verse 13. And this links to the prophet portion in Malachi 3 or 3 and 4 when you read it, depending on what text your Bible translation is based on. So the sprinkling of blood over the priest during their ordination represents both the Messiah in his first coming and in his second coming. In Leviticus 8 verse 3 and 4, and then later Leviticus 8 verse 31-36, we are also reminded of the prophet portion 2 weeks ago from Ezekiel 45 and 46. Here we read that the priests are ordained at the entrance to the tabernacle. Remember, the entrance of the tabernacle faced east. And in Ezekiel, the prince, the Messiah, worships at the threshold of the eastern gate. The entrance to the tabernacle represents the eastern gate of Jerusalem, of the future temple. The gate that was blocked by Saladin because he believes the Bible more than most Christians did. The priests are ordained at the threshold or at the entrance to the tabernacle and not inside, because they need to be ordained first before they could enter. And then we read another thing, the slaughtering of the sacrificial animals for the sin offering and for the burnt offering must occur outside of the tabernacle on the northern side. Remember, entrance is on the eastern side, slaughtering of the animals on the northern side. The Hebrew word for north is tzafon. It's spelled Sadi Fei Nun, correction, Sadi Fei Waf Nun Sufit. Tzafon also means hidden or secret or concealed. And it refers, Safon, and this outpouring or slaughtering of the animals at the northern side of the tabernacle refers to our hidden sins, the things we do in darkness, the things we hope nobody ever sees or finds out. And it also refers to sins in our thought. True to Yeshua's narrow interpretation of the Torah law, which we spoke about in last week's gospel portion from Matthew 5, verse 17 to 37, our thoughts, we can sin in our thoughts. And sins from the 10 commandments that happens in our thoughts, for instance, is not to honor our parents, to disrespect our parents, or to covet, or to hate other people. It's all sins that occurs in our thought, and it's linked to north, to Safon. Our eyes that look at things that we desire, it may flare up into a burning desire in our hearts before we eventually sin in our deeds, but it's already a sin in our thoughts, as Yeshua explained. We have a responsibility to arrest our negative thoughts. It's not easy, but it's a duty. We have to deliberately replace sinful thoughts with positive and godly thoughts in order to clear our conscience. And we learn about this from, remember, the burnt offering and the sin offering, slaughtering of the animals at the north side of the tabernacle. And it relates to Safon. If we look at those letters of Tzafon, we see that Sadi, the first letter, refers to a righteous person, that's Sadik. The letter looks a little bit like a snail with its eyes on stalks, but it also represents a fishhook or a bird trap, telling us to arrest our negative thoughts, trap the thoughts before they progress. And then the second letter, Pei or Fei, Pei and Fei is the same letter. It depends on whether there's a little likud dot inside the letter. It represents a mouth that speaks. Vav is a connector. It represents a nail or a hook that binds things together. And Nun represents multiplication. And multiplication like fish, exactly. Therefore, Tzafon reveals the secret that a righteous person who controls his mouth from self-control, for him comes multiplication as a reward from Adonai. Therefore, we can say that negative thoughts, sinful thoughts, sets us up for failure. But if we can trap those thoughts like a bird trap and supplant them with positive, righteous thoughts, then that will set us up for success. If we proactively guard our thoughts, we can proactively guard our thoughts by guarding the things we look at, the things we read, and the things we listen to. Remember that korban, the Hebrew word for offering, means to draw close. If we sacrifice our negative thoughts, we are drawing close to Adonai Eloheinu. And with that, enough said about this week's Torah portion from Leviticus. I want to encourage you to read it with an open mind and inquiring mind. And until the next video, I pray that Adonai Eloheinu will bless you and keep you. I pray that He will shine His face upon you and be gracious to you. I pray that He will provide for all your needs and that He will make you complete and give you peace. Shalom, shalom.